Welcome back to another episode of The Other Side of the Struggle. We have with us back the fabulous Kyson Kidd, and I really love the subject that we're talking about today. And I really wanted Kyson to be on with us today because we're talking about my husband. Like, I found my husband with porn. I know he's looking at porn. Now what? And where Kyson is really, really fabulous at helping the men work through pornography addictions, I felt like having his perspective in on this discussion would be just super helpful and just great. And, to be honest with you too, I mean, it's not just the husbands that are struggling with pornography addiction. Sometimes it's the wife. And I know, like, in this podcast, I've seen a lot of men actually starting to come into my groups because it's their wife that's actually been betraying them and looking into porn and things like that. So it's been an interesting dynamic to see. So either way, I felt like Kyson would be just a fabulous uh guest speaker on this podcast. He's going to offer a lot of insight and a lot of wisdom. So let's welcome back Kyson. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, happy to be here. This is going to be an exciting conversation and topic.
I agree. I agree. So, Kyson, like a little bit before the podcast started, we were just kind of talking back and forth about like the flow and how we wanted things to go. Um, but I mentioned like there's three different kinds of husbands from what I have seen. Um, and I kind of compare them to salsa. And it's kind of funny and it's kind of not, to be honest with you, but like, and you'll see why, listeners, as we go through this. But like, number one, you have your mild guy. Now this is a guy that doesn't like the pornography addiction. He hates it. In fact, he hates what it does to him. He hates that what it's doing to his wife and kids. Um, and he wants to change it, but he doesn't know how, and he feels pretty powerless to be able to do anything about it. So that's the mild. The medium is someone who is more likely to be gaslighting, meaning like the wife will bring like the evidence to him and he'll make her doubt the evidence through his lies and things like that. He's more likely to blame her for his problem, and he's a bit less willing to admit that it is a problem. And then you've got your jalapeno. Now, the jalapeno, everybody likes to just kind of say that guy is just a flat out jerk, okay? Because the jalapeno is abusive in words, in oftentimes, physically. The jalapeno has zero remorse for anything he's doing. And I've seen like all three different kinds of husbands, working with the women that I do. And usually with a jalapeno, I'm not going to say he's a jerk. I think that this is a guy that has completely shut his emotions and his humanity down, right? And that's a very sad place for someone to be in. But with a jalapeno, where there's so much safety at risk, that's usually the guy that I'm like, we need to sever the ties there. The you need to go get yourself safe to the wife. You know what I mean?
Like get some space. Would you say that there's 0% chance of coming back from that, or do you put it at like 1%?
It's a low percentage, but no, no, there is actually a chance to come back from it. I actually have personally seen it. One of my favorite people, he's a deceased now. But he was that jalapeno. Um, and when he finally realized like everything he was risking from being the jalapeno, he got himself some serious help, and was actually able to restore his family. And so no, there is a chance, but the further I think into the salsa you go, the chance does get less. Because I've also seen uh men that are that jalapeno that are totally unwilling to change. Like it's all everybody else's fault. There's nothing at all wrong with him, and I'm thinking about one person in particular that I know. Um, and this guy is a jalapeno, and even me personally, and I'm not married to him, right? I had to cut off ties with him because he became dangerous to me.
Hmm.
So, you like in each class, there's differences, and either way, like it's still going to take work, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts about those classifications.
Yeah, I think you're right on too. I mean, with the jalapeno, I love your idea of it's time to create space, safety, boundary. Um, that can be such a heavy thing to face, but yeah, I think you're right on there. And then I'd say with the other two, since I'm usually working with the guys, my perspective is sort of like, okay, this is the one who's ready to work on things, has been trying, they just don't have the tools. Then you've got the guy in the middle. That's what do you
Hmm.
call it?
The
Medium.
medium, the
Yeah,
medium.
medium guy is usually like, yeah, I know like it's a problem, but I'm also not willing to talk to my wife about it. I'm not willing to really make any big steps, but like, thanks for talking with me. Or sometimes there's like an unwillingness to build self-awareness. So a lot of
Mm.
times as I'm asking them questions, they're sort of like, no, it's just, there's a lot of that attitude where it's like, no, there's no underlying issue. I just like it, or I just lust sometimes. And it's like, okay, dude. So if there's like an unwillingness to explore and to get curious, that's a good sign that you're in
In the
medium or
medium.
jalapeno mode, potentially could look that way. Um, so yeah, I don't know if I'd have anything else to add on the classifications other than they are real. That is,
Yes.
and I guess I would add this. When you find out, if it's like, okay, boom, just found out my husband's using porn, um, it could be nice to have sort of some questions that would help you discern what level they're at, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Like what kinds of questions would you have them start asking? Like 'cause I have my own set, but I feel like this is a really awesome conversation because, I still come from the perspective of the wife of the betrayed, right?
Mhm.
Um, and not, I want to say too, like the man, the one that's actually doing the betraying is also feeling betrayed. Like it's really amazing to me how similar um our thoughts are. Like when Ruben, my husband, was really deeply struggling with his pornography addiction, a lot of the thoughts that I had around his addiction and around him were the exact same thoughts he was having around me and my response to his addiction, right? So it was very similar. And so that's why it was so powerful when I changed and changed my thinking patterns and changed the way I viewed things was because it gave him the power to do the same. Um, now, you know, that can be a hard pill to swallow, I think, because, as the wife, I wasn't the one that was looking at porn. I wasn't the one in my mind that was damaging the relationship, even though a lot of my behaviors were not healthy for the relationship either, right? But I was so focused on what he was doing, and he was so ultra focused on what I was doing, and we were having the same thoughts exactly, which was really interesting. And so I find that to be the case in a lot of situations.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance, I think, almost like a dance between because I think sometimes we can pendulum swing right from like, okay, sometimes we go like punish the husband, like
Mhm.
mad at him, throw him out, make it, make him feel the hurt. And then sometimes we swing the other way that's like, oh, well, it's not his, it's not his fault all the way. He probably had a tough childhood. Like, be so gentle, like whatever. And when you lean that way, you sometimes don't give yourself permission to actually feel through what you're feeling through. So I
Mhm.
think if you could have it be a dance between those two, where like, okay, it's an opportunity to be very present as you find out your husband's using porn. I think to say, okay, what do I like, what would be best for me in this situation? Do you want to talk it out right now, or do you want to say, I'm going to go get some space, I'm going to go like punch some pillows, and let's talk in an hour, let's talk tomorrow? Like, please give yourself permission to feel. um you get to have your experience, and then if you can also find it in yourself to ask some questions, I think it will give you the clarity that you're wanting. Um, yeah, so I mean, some of the questions that come to mind, can we dive into some of the questions that
Yeah, please.
I think, a really, you've got the generic, like, all right, tell me what's going on. Go for
Mhm.
that one. It's probably a good starter. But some of the questions I think that would be awesome would be like, do you desire to change? What have you been trying? What have you tried? What's working and what's not working? Um, I think, yeah, anyway, there's this idea of like, okay, where did it start? I'm kind of thinking like background questions. When did it start? Is this like from childhood? Like, get some real perspective, like how often are you struggling? I really love, how often do you feel tempted? Not just how often do you actually give in and use porn, but are you feeling tempted like all day every day? I think that's an important question. And then I was going to say, um there's this tendency sometimes to assume the worst, as in, especially for the woman, I think, well, for either partner, if the partner is being betrayed, right, it can be really easy to question, like, oh, is he looking at porn because he isn't attracted to me, or because he doesn't love me, or because he's not happy in our marriage? And I think it can be really powerful to, instead of wonder those things and kind of secretly believe them, I think get them out on the table. I'm curious if you
Yes.
agree with that.
Yes. And I was gonna say too that, I love those questions and they are like super, super powerful questions. But one of the things that I know, like, women, I feel like would be a lot more willing to ask those questions if they felt like they were actually going to be able to get answers from their husbands, right?
Mm.
Because the husbands, they're going to be in this moment where they're going to be feeling attacked because they are attacking themselves. The wife might not necessarily be wanting to attack, but because she's emotionally charged too, like those questions can feel attacking. So
Mm.
I would actually start like those are questions you definitely want to ask and those are important questions. But I would start the conversation by first saying something along the lines of, are you willing to make me a partner on this, right? Are you willing to communicate with me on this? Are you willing to work with me on this and let me know what's really going on,
Those are awesome.
right? Because you've got to open the door for the communication in order for communication to happen. If you just come to him and you're saying things like, "Well, how long has this been going on? How often do you desire this? How often?" I feel like that's going to be like, you know,
Yeah,
constantly like nitpicking and constantly, woodpecking him. Um, make sure that he's willing to communicate with you first. Because
okay.
if he's willing and you're opening that door, then now you can start asking some of those questions because you have set the intention that, hey, I'm not coming after you and I'm not angry. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to yell. Or if I feel like I'm going to, I'm going to remove myself from the situation because if we get into the communication emotionally charged, then communication stops immediately. And
Mhm.
this is why husbands often don't communicate, I feel, is because they're already so confused about emotions that it's created a pornography problem. And so when their wife comes to them with these questions, it's feeling emotionally charged. That's why we've got to first and foremost open the door. Are you willing to talk with me about this? You know what I
I
mean?
love that. Yeah. Yeah. Like, even, okay, I'm feeling very hurt. You can express an emotion.
Mhm.
I would love to talk about this. Like, I want to ask some questions and get a feel for like where you're at. Are you willing to do that with me? I think that sounds way powerful.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So, um I guess my next question though is like each one of them is going to respond to those questions differently, right?
Mhm.
Cuz like your mild guy, like he's totally going to be open and willing and want to share and like he values, the trust of his wife. Whereas the jalapeno doesn't care, right? He has to have kind of that Saul moment where, the angel comes down and like shakes him, right? To finally be like, "Oh, okay. I think I'm starting to get this," right? So, how would you respond? Like, what are the best ways for women to respond to, or men, whoever it is that's dealing with this difficult partner? How should we respond to them when they're not willing to chat?
I mean, wow, there's the big question. If the wife says, "Hey, I want to talk about things," and they're like, "I'm not willing to chat," like, no, not. Is that what you're saying? That's the
Mm-hmm.
question.
Yeah, like, why would you want me to talk about this? Like, and they kind of come across with a derogatory response.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's your sign that they're either in medium or jalapeno mode.
Yep, I
Usually,
agree.
there is a chance that it's still mild, but they're just like freaking out. A small chance. Um, because as perspective, like a lot of these men, especially if they grew up in the church, there's they've been being taught like every fifth Sunday and every other priest quorum for their whole life that like porn will ruin your life and your family and it's going to destroy, break your heart,
Yeah,
your
and we have actually a lot of listeners from different faiths and denominations that listen to this podcast, and I feel like even like evangelicals, Catholics, anyone that is Christian hears that. You know what I mean?
yeah, the story that like if you can't figure out your crap, then like you're going to ruin everything. And so there is a this moment may feel like that for the husband, like, oh no, here it is, I've ruined everything. So if they're like not willing to talk, or if they're in really shutdown mode, I think additional questions, it's like they've already said I don't want to talk, but I would ask, okay, are you never going to talk to me, or do you just want some time?
Yeah, that's a
Are
good one.
you, yeah, like, are we I mean, it's kind of your question, are we going to work together on this, or like what's going on? um what do you do if they just full say, I'm not talking about it? Then I think you say, then I think you start looking at, well, cool, what's my boundary then? What's my decision?
Yes.
um cool, well, let's take a break from each other, or cool, let's um I don't know, what would be the other options? Like, that just seems like if you're not going to work together, you've got this much time to figure your crap out and decide that we're going to work together, or I'm going to start making this decision. I don't know.
Well, see, and I think that's where decisions really come in to play because if somebody's not willing to communicate with you, you trying to communicate your decisions with them is actually kind of sometimes dangerous
Mm.
because then you've got like sabotage on top of that, and you've got anger, and you've got how dare you betray me kind of a thing, even though, it was the guy, not the guy, but it was either the medium or the jalapeno that started the betrayal, you know? I think at this point, this is where you start to make some decisions on your own. So, for example, if your jalapeno is physically abusive, You don't tell him you're leaving,
Right.
right? You just do it. You just do it. You get far, far away and you don't let him know because your safety is what matters. With the medium, you have to just be like, okay, dude, um, I'm going to have to start making some decisions then on my own, which you probably will not like. And this is the conversation that I've had to have sometimes with other people that are in that medium state. If you're not willing to work with me, that's your decision. I'm not going to force you. However, you will put me in the position of making decisions that you will not like that you're just going to have to deal with, right? Because that's the natural consequence of that is when you refuse to make decisions. And this is really important, no matter where you're at, whether you're in trauma or not in trauma, like if you don't make decisions, someone else will make those decisions for you and you're not going to like them. Like if you just decide not to pay a bill, well, someone else will decide to come and take your car or your house, right?
Yeah.
Someone else will make decisions for you that you are not going to like. That's just the natural consequence. So when you can speak to natural consequences with confidence, I feel like that's a really big piece to this next step. That if your husband is looking at porn, well then, obviously you definitely want him to be a part of the decision making process because if he's invested in his own healing, that's fabulous, right? Then we have something to work on. But if he's not, then you cannot stay, even if he is, you cannot stay stuck in, well, what is he doing mode? Because that stifles your ability to make decisions and to live your life, right?
Right. Yeah, and it stifles him too, right? There's
Yeah.
just you can create some weird dynamics here. I'm curious what your insight is on this as I'm picturing you like kind of that picture of like a wife just finds out and she's trying to navigate those conversations. What's your thoughts on like how to navigate that while also feeling all the extreme emotions that you probably feel of like being betrayed? Because we're kind of talking like here are words to say, but
Mhm.
it's pretty likely that it's going to be a pretty big roller coaster of emotions.
Oh, yes.
What's your insight on that? Like, do you just kind of walk through it, be like use the emotions and then also speak, or do you try to like separate or anything like that?
So that's actually a fantastic question, Kyson, because emotions are going to be present no matter what. And every single day in all aspects of life, emotions are there, right? We can be feeling shame, we can be feeling joy, we can be feeling elation, we can be feeling lost, lonely. Like there's a whole spectrum of emotions that are there to get us to pay attention. That is what
Mhm.
emotions do, is they get us to pay attention to something. So for example, if I'm feeling scared, I'm paying attention to what it is I'm scared of, right? If I'm feeling absolute elation, I'm paying attention to what it is that is helping me feel that elation. So often, like when I'm cuddling my little 2-year-old, I'm feeling completely elated, and I know that if I cuddle her more, I'm going to get more of that emotion. If, however, I watch horror movies on a consistent basis, I'm going to be in a fear mode, constantly having nightmares, and I know that that's something I need to avoid, right? And so fear is something to avoid, uh, elation is something to bring into us more. But the problem comes in to when we are not checking into our own emotions, and that happens when we're too busy wondering about the actions of another person, right? When that happens and you're not checking in with yourself, you are really struggling to also create boundaries and communication and confidence. And if you're struggling with those things, you're going to struggle with communication in general. Okay?
Hmm.
Because true communication comes from when you are actually first and foremost giving yourself truth. Truth does not look like, I hate you, you're awful, you are the worst, what is wrong with you? If you just looked more like the models he was looking at, then he wouldn't feel the need to look at porn. If you just gave him more sex, he wouldn't feel the need to look at porn. So, confidence and truth are not shame language. Okay? They will never, ever, ever be shame language because the shame language comes from the adversary. And therefore the adversary cannot tell the truth. There you go, right? But
Yeah.
once you start giving yourself truth, which are things like, this is not my fault, this is not on me, I did nothing to make them choose to do this. Um, I maybe could be better at acknowledging their emotions. Maybe I do have thoughts that are in my subconscious that are not healthy and that are damaging to this relationship, but I'm going to love myself. I'm going to forgive myself. I am going to move forward. And when I make a mistake, again, I'm going to love myself. I'm going to forgive myself. And I'm going to choose to act in confidence rather than, scarcity and fear.
Hmm.
Then, now all of a sudden, when you're giving yourself that kind of communication, because you need to communicate with yourself before you can ever communicate with others. Whatever you communicate with yourself is exactly what you're going to communicate with others. So if you're going to communicate confidence, love, respect, truth to yourself, and set boundaries with yourself to help you feel like a fantastic human, then you can actually give that same language to other people. You cannot give what you do not have. And so if you have a husband who is looking at pornography and he's feeling all of this shame, or maybe he's not, maybe he's not remorseful at all, you need to be able to give yourself your needs and have your own back and be your own best friend in order to deliver that kind of communication to another person.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm picturing like, okay, so maybe if you find, let's say you find porn on the family computer or something, you're like, it seems like it's my husband, or it would be ideal if you had a little time to go. I'm gonna like give myself all this good communication you talked about, give myself space to feel. I'm gonna like listen to what I'm feeling, thinking, experiencing, and then go talk. And then if you find out in the moment, it may, for some people, it may be helpful to say, I'm not ready to talk about this right now. I'm gonna take some time, and then let's talk in 20 minutes, or I'll be back in a second. Like
Right.
I'll be back, and then we can duke it out or talk lovingly. But I love what you're saying about giving yourself space first before trying to like give the other person all that space and good communication. That's awesome.
Yes, yes. And I would also suggest, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, Kyson, for both men and women who are struggling in the relationship aspect, whether you are the betrayed or the betrayer. And I know that's kind of a harsh language, but we actually go in and out of both of those. Sometimes we're so busy stuck on like what someone else is doing that we don't realize how that stuckness is actually a self-betrayal. And sometimes we realize that we're the betrayer and we're so ashamed that we become the betrayed as well. So, it's the betrayer, the betrayal. It's something that goes in and out. Okay? But no matter where you're at, whether you're the betrayed or whether you are the betrayer, you have to start finding some time to get clarity. Okay, because the reason why this is here in the first place is because you're in a muddled mess of either emotions or thoughts or whatever it is that's created the problem. You really need to start hacking at the roots before you can actually kill the plant. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so giving yourself time, like Kyson is saying, to get clear and to give yourself the space and the ability to start thinking and seeing what really is there that's causing all of this trauma. Because pornography addiction, the reason why pornography is even a thing is because the person that's looking at the pornography has been dealt some sort of trauma, and they're using pornography to soothe that, right? And so when you've got that kind of stuff happening, giving yourself the time and the space needed to check in is vital. It is key because you've got to like it takes time and it takes quiet and it takes space in order for your brain to start shifting and start saying, "Oh, you know what? Actually, this is the thing I need to learn versus what I thought I knew." You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. It seems like the pattern, one of the pieces of that pattern you're talking about is being in survival mode. Like so
Mhm.
many times, especially for the porn user, um, they're usually saying things like, I'm just surviving. I'm barely, I'm so busy. There's too much to do. I'm exhausted. Survival mode instead of like thriving, slowing down and saying, what do I actually feel and think? And what's stopping me? Where am I stuck? And then obviously for the spouse that finds out about the porn use, then that can often be triggered as well. Like, oh, now I'm in survival mode. What do we do to survive? But instead, for some reason, I picture like bringing in the feeling of, when you go camping or when you get a minute out in nature and you just sit and you go like, okay,
Yeah.
let me feel, let me get clear. And I think the two tablespoons of hope to toss in, I just to reiterate, you already said this, but that porn doesn't exist. No one's using porn, in my opinion. No one's using porn that isn't also traumatized, like you said, or that doesn't have some issues as far as connecting and self-love and shame, things like that. Like porn is not a natural porn is not something that a healthy person loves to indulge in. So you
No.
can know that regardless of what level the spouse is in that's using porn, you can know that the issue is not yours, like you said. So there's that bit of hope. Like there's an underlying thing. There is hope for healing, and that leads to my second tablespoon or bucket full of hope is that through Christ, all things can heal. Not just the person using porn, but the person that feels betrayed. Not just, he can help heal all the things. He can help you step out of survival mode and into hopeful mode, even amidst the like most difficult, painful parts of this. And I think sometimes we also go like, oh, he'll help me afterwards, like after I'm hurt, after we fix things. But I think just letting Christ be part of like every moment, like, wow, I'm feeling huge emotions right now. How can I give it to him? How can I learn with him? Wow, I'm going to have a really hard conversation with my spouse right now. How can I step in with him? um, I'm having a hard time loving myself. How can I bring him in? And I would just invite people to do that right from the beginning and trust that he is so connected to you in those moments.
Yeah. And I love that because he completely is. He completely is. Like, here's Kyson, healed from a pornography addiction. Here I am, healed from betrayal trauma. And, Kyson and I work back and forth too as business partners. He's coached me a little bit and I've coached him a little bit too. And there's always layers, that still are coming up and out. And we are learning still, just Kyson and I, how to be better humans, right? But the reason why we are on a consistent basis to heal, why we have actually both healed these traumas is because we both realized that we couldn't do it on our own, that we needed the highest form of love. Now, I will also say that there are people that come and listen to this podcast that aren't even Christian, and I know this because they actually reach out to me. They've been reaching out to me recently and letting me know. And so here's my point to those of you that maybe are on the fence about like whether or not you believe in God. To me and Kyson, the highest form of love is God. But what is the highest form of love to you? You know that love exists. You know it does because you have felt it. And you have actually reciprocated it. You've received it to some degree. So, what is love to you? Like, what is the highest form of love? And that is also where you're going to find the highest form of wisdom and the highest form of truth. And this highest form of love also has to have created you in some form because it loves you so deeply that it sees pieces of you that you never would have seen yourself. So, what is that highest form of love to you? And if you can plug that into what we're saying here, you're going to get some pretty serious answers because now you're actually like tapping into laws, like universal laws, you know? So, to wrap up, Kyson, talking about like you've we found the husband with porn. Now what? You know, we definitely want to say understand like who it is you're dealing with, and ways to communicate with each type. Give yourself space that you need. Is there any final thoughts that you feel like somebody really needs to hear when it comes to discovering this, trial, this trauma,
It feels like there must be. I can feel it like kind of percolating.
the buzzing?
Yeah, the buzz. I'm just thinking of the idea of practicing these principles. It doesn't always have to be like if you suspect there's porn use, you kind of mentioned that before we hopped on here. Like if you suspect there's porn use or there has been in past relationships and you're thinking like, what if there is in my present relationship? I think you can practice creating safety within yourself and within a relationship in other small ways too. Like it can be about, doing the dishes or communication or whatever. I just think there's so much value in creating safety and connection. As I was going to bed last night, this phrase came to my mind that was like, you can't you can't feel close and connected without doing the things that close connected people do. Like you can't
I
pretend.
love that. Whoa,
Yeah, like
that's a good one.
you can't fake it. You know what I mean? Close
Yeah.
connected people say what they're feeling, say what they're thinking, and there's a simplicity about just being honest and getting rid of all the weird filters and like, oh, I have to say it this way, or else he's gonna feel this way. I have to say that this way, or else I'm gonna feel uncomfortable. And just saying, sometimes I'm afraid you might be using porn. Can I ask you about that? Or just like saying exactly what's in your heart, and to practice that principle around all the areas of your life, and then building up to whatever you're trying.
Yeah. And be honest with it too, like, and say, but I'm not sure. You know, these are
Yeah,
the reasons why I'm worried. I would hope you would tell me the truth, and this is how I would feel if you weren't telling me the truth. This is how I would probably want to react if you weren't telling me the truth, you know?
yeah,
Um, be vulnerable with people. Like we tend to want to not be. And granted, someone you don't really want to be vulnerable with is probably the jalapeno, right? You have to not really let them know what's going on in your mind. But with the medium or the mild, be practicing being that vulnerable space with yourself too. Like be honest with yourself. Be vulnerable with yourself. You don't have to be the strong one all the time.
Yeah.
And when you can be honest and vulnerable with yourself, you're able to be honest and vulnerable with other people. And the cool thing is you'll find through that honesty and that vulnerability, people that will respect it,
Hmm.
which is something I think everybody wants, right?
That's awesome. Yeah, I love just like stepping into your power, trusting that you can handle. Like that's the thought I had as you're talking, is like what you're saying is proof that like porn can't break you. Meaning your husband struggling with porn doesn't necessarily have to break you. It's all about where you're standing, your connection to truth and love and your higher power. There, even if you feel broken, that's okay to experience that. But just this idea that you can step through, like you really can step through it. And for those struggling with porn can't break you either in that sense. Like you can
Yeah,
step into close connected relationships. There's so much beautiful potential.
I agree. And what a perfect thing to land on. Okay, Kyson, do you have a Facebook group for people to come and hang out with you?
Yes, it's called True Masculinity, a Brotherhood. If you want to look, you can look me up on Facebook, but it's facebook.com/groups slash, we'll put it in the notes below, slash group slash freedom FP. Anyway, all right, there you
We'll
go.
put it in the notes.
Yeah.
Go take a look at the show notes, okay? All right. Thank you so much, Kyson, for hanging out with us today.
Mhm.
Fantastic discussion. And to our listeners, feel free to reach out to us either on YouTube or in one of our groups. There's you can get on our
Social media.
on our social media. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Anyway, get on our social media, reach out to us and ask us if there's a podcast you would really love to hear and some questions you'd like us to address on the podcast. We would love to do that for you. Anyway, thanks so much for hanging out with me. Next week, everyone, we are going to be talking about I need emotional support, and that's where we're going to start talking about like the excuses that we have that we give ourselves sometimes when it comes to healing, but how we're going to combat those excuses. And we are doing that with a brand new guest as well. So I can't wait to introduce you to our guest speaker for next week. And in the meantime, I'll see you soon, everyone. Bye.